The French invasion of Russia in 1812, also known as the Patriotic War in Russia and the Second Polish War in France, was an offensive campaign begun by French leader Napoleon Bonaparte against Russia, aiming to force the Russian Empire back into the continental blockade of the United Kingdom. This war was part of the Napoleonic Wars, a series of global major conflicts pitting the French Empire against an array of European states formed into various coalitions. The invasion, however, reduced the invading forces of France and its allies to a sliver of their original strength, and was believed to be the beginning of the end to Napoleon's ambitions of European dominance. Path to war. After seizing political power in France in a 1799 coup d'etat, General Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself emperor in 1804 and began his massive expansion of France in Europe via what became known as the Napoleonic Wars. By the time of the invasion, the French Empire reached its greatest extent with its occupation of the Swiss Confederation, the Confederation of the Rhine, the Duchy of Warsaw, the Kingdom of Italy, and the Kingdom of Spain. Austria, Russia, Denmark, Norway, and Prussia had been browbeaten into becoming allies. Only the United Kingdom remained fully beyond his reach. In 1806, Napoleon imposed an embargo on the British via what was known as the Continental System, which prohibited trade between Britain and France-occupied states or its allies, such as Russia. Russia, under the reign of Emperor Alexander I, formerly a natural ally of France, was deleteriously impacted by the system's rule and thus, by the end of 1810, withdrew from the system and resumed illicit trade with Britain, aggravating the Franco-Russian tie. In retaliation, Napoleon launched a massive campaign against Russia in the summer of 1812. The invasion. In preparation for the campaign, 220,000 Russian soldiers were summoned and divided into 3 armies to guard the western frontier, with Emperor Alexander I stationed in Vilna, modern-day Vilnius in Lithuania, being the general commander. The first army, under Commander Barclay de Tolly, was stationed near the border between East Prussia and the Duchy of Warsaw. The second army, under General Bagration, was located further south in modern-day Belarus. The third army, under General Alexander Tormasov, stood further south but still in Belarus. On the French side, Napoleon summoned the largest army that Europe had ever seen for the invasion of Russia. On June 24, 1812, the Grand Army of 690,000 men crossed the River Niemen and headed towards Moscow. The French troops were divided as follows. The central force under the direct command of Napoleon was on the Niemen at Kaunas, a city in the Russian Empire's Vilna Governorate. On his right wing at Grodno were French troops under the Empire's brother, Jerome Bonaparte. On the extreme French left were Prussian men under Antony MacDonald, Marshal of France. And on the extreme right was Prince Karl of Schwarzenberg, leading Austrian troops. A reserve army of 225,000 troops was stationed in Germany and Poland. While Napoleon's goal was to win a quick victory that forced Alexander to negotiate, the Russians adopted a strategy of retreating whenever Napoleon's forces attempted to attack. Shortly after hearing the news of the Grand Army crossing the Niemen River, Barclay moved his soldiers to the Drissa camp, a fortified position on the left bank of the western Divna River, after destroying the remaining depots and the bridge across the Divna to deny the enemy supplies, letting the Grand Army capture the city of Vilna on June 28th with barely a fight. From there, Barclay continued his retreat tactic, first abandoning Drissa to withdraw to Vitebsk, then to Smolensk. Meanwhile, to the south, Bagration successfully avoided the French army attack, then crossed to Dnieper on July 25th to convene with Barclay de Tolly's First Army in early August. Napoleon, after chasing the Russians from Vilna to Vitebsk, resolved to go to Smolensk, where the first major battle of the French invasion of Russia took place. Thousands of men died in this bloody battle, and the city was burned to the ground by French artillery bombardment. To save the army, Barclay de Tolly abandoned the city, destroying all ammunition stores and bridges, and retreated to Borodino, a village located just about 120 kilometers from Moscow. After the Battle of Smolensk, Barclay de Tolly was replaced by General Mikhail Kutuzov to lead the Russian troops. On September 7th, near the village of Borodino, the French and Russians pounded each other with cannon booms and musket shots and launched a number of charges and countercharges. By the end of the day, the Grand Army won the battle against the Imperial Russian Army with casualties in a ratio of 2 to 3, while the Russians maintained their combat strength by withdrawing to the south of Moscow. On September 14th, Napoleon and his army arrived in Moscow, only to see the city in ashes, with most of the population having escaped, and little food remaining. From his new quarters in the Kremlin, Napoleon sent a letter to Emperor Alexander, inviting him to make peace and end the war, but no response ever came. After 5 weeks, facing the onset of the cruel Russian winter, Napoleon led his army of only 100,000 survivors out of Moscow to the south, but was attacked at Maloyaroslavets, a small town located about 120 kilometers southwest of Moscow, by a replenished Russian army and was forced back to the road they took in. During their disastrous retreat, his army was reduced by the extreme Russian weather, starvation, and continual harassment from the aggressive and merciless Russian army led by Kutuzov. In November, they reached Smolensk, where they only found famines. The remaining 24,000 men then marched on to Borisov, a city in modern-day Belarus near the Berezina River. The crossing of the Berezina River was a final French tragedy, with 2 Russian armies slaughtering the Grand Army's remains. Borisov was finally taken by the French corps, but the Russians burned the bridge before they withdrew. In early December 1812, as the remnants of Napoleon's army were about 100 kilometers east of Vilna, Napoleon left the army under the command of Admiral Joachim Murat, also King of Naples, and sped toward Paris amid rumors of a coup attempt. Subsequently, Murat left what was left of the Grand Army to try to save his Kingdom of Naples. 9 days later, what little remained of the Grand Army crossed the Niemen River and left Russian territory. Aftermath. The French invasion of Russia is among the most lethal military operations in history. In less than 6 months of the war, France lost more than 300,000 men, while Russia's casualties were about 210,000 men. The Russian Great Victory to defeat the French army paved the way for the War of the Sixth Coalition that ultimately resulted in Napoleon's defeat and exile on the island of Elba. Generally, the campaign was the key turning point of the Napoleonic Wars, marking a huge blow to Napoleon's ambitions of dominating Europe.
Thanks for watching. If you find this information useful, please give us a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos of history.